everybody, how is it going? Welcome to What is Fabrizio Inking. I was talking for about 5 minutes and realized I was not live. So my deepest and darkest secrets were revealed during that time. Oh well. How's it going? Thanks everybody for popping in. I appreciate it. Alpha Channel, how's it going? PGP Garzo 1218. Orale. Logan Andrews, hello everyone. Good Sunday. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm a little late. Apologies. So this is what I'll be working on today. It's the book bug. And this is issue 4. The first page, actually. So made a decent amount of progress on this. Let me focus in on that. So we have the book bug, and we have all of these books. He's inside his House O books. If you've read issue 1 or 2 or seen any images, you'll kind of get what that's about. So we have this big panel here, and then we have a couple small panels at the bottom. And I don't know how far I'll get today. I definitely won't finish the page, though. So any questions, let me know. If not, I'm just going to jump right in. Yeah, so if you're new to the channel, I have a comic book called Horace H. Hoover. And it is currently... I have issues 1, 2, and 3 are done. And they're at the printers for the second round of proofs. So if those look good, hopefully they'll be printed and available sometime in June. And if you are at Three Rivers Comic Con, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll have them there. Definitely for Plastic City in Massachusetts. So for any news or latest info, go to horacehoover.com or my Twitter handle, which should be located on there. Twitter, Instagram, etc., etc. So you're going to be looking at a lot of books being inked. I will say this, the one thing I'm at right now is doing the background. You have to be very careful that essentially 2 things. The line thickness changes because you don't want those books in the background to look like they're in the foreground or middle ground. So you've got to make the lines thinner, which is basically atmospheric perspective, and breaking up the lines helps that out a little bit as well. So I have to have a really light touch with these books in the background. Sometimes I'll even fade off a line to really drive home that's in the background. And whenever this gets colored, it'll be really apparent. But you should be able to read the page before you color it, even if it's going to be a colored comic. Logan Andrews, what would your advice be for new prod people for creating a page? Why would you use larger panels for some scenes and smaller for others? Wow, that's a good question. It starts with the script. So I would say it's easier if you're writing the script, but that's not always the case. You know, you still have to get a story idea across. So you just have to figure out how many panels do I have allotted, because you don't want a 300-page comic book unless it needs to be 300 pages. So what's the story, the narrative that you need to get across? Is the character kicking a ball and smashing a window pane? Are they fighting somebody and getting beat down and now they're crumpled in the corner? So first I would start with that. What do you want to get across? And make sure that you you go over and above what you think people need, not to treat them like children. I don't mean that. But there are some very specific things you do actually need to hold their hand for. If you make a too big of a leap in the visual storytelling, it's not that people will get lost, they will figure it out through context, but you don't want them to stop even for like a few seconds and go, wait a minute, what happened? This panel shows him holding the ball, and then the next panel is the window getting smashed. Now, sometimes you'll be like, okay, he kicked the ball, smashed the window. But sometimes you need to actually show him, the foot contacting the ball, and then the next panel would be the window smashing. So you have to think about what you need to get across, how many panels you have available to you, and then from there, that kind of dictates the size of the panels as far as the story. Now, the other reason you would have a big panel versus a small panel is sort of visual weight. So think of it like if you're doing a drawing and you have 10 characters, and you want Superman to look like the leader of this group, you make him bigger, you put him in the front, you give him a different pose. It's really just a way to visually create a hierarchy between characters, and it's the same for panels too. In this opening splash, I really wanted a big shot of the book bug and this room, because one of the main things is once we set this and we have a lot of detail, your brain will essentially fill in the other smaller details after this. So, for the next couple of pages, if we're in that house and that room full of books, I don't have to draw every single book because I really spent some time doing it in that first panel. So that's probably the best advice I can give. It's always going to be a balance between those two things, though. It can get pretty hard to not always do a big splash page. They're the most fun to draw. People love splash pages, but at the end of the day, you really need to tell a story. So, like I said, as much as that splash page is fun, you need to get those panels in to tell the story. There is a page in issue 3 where I have 10 or 11 panels on a page, which sounds like a lot. And it's a lot of panels for a page. But what that lets me do is tell a lot of story in a really small area. So, and then there's other parts of the issue where I have a full page spread, So that balance between the two, it basically gives you the freedom to weight things in a hierarchy, but it also can provide good pacing for the reader. So sometimes they're really, focused on these small panels, getting a lot of story, character interaction, character growth, and then sometimes if you hit them with a splash page, it's a huge difference between those tiny little panels and a splash page. And that really will drive home that splash page. But if you have splash pages on every page, they really won't have the same weight. Visual interest and essentially switching things up. Some people say, that you really you can't have mid shots all the time for your comic book and on your page. It should be a close-up. You should have a mid shot. You should have a, you know, bird's eye, ant's eye, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, to some degree, yes, I agree with that. But if you look at some of the greats, like John Buscema, sometimes an entire issue is mid shots with maybe a close-up of a hand holding a sword or something like that. So use it as a guide. Again, I know everybody says this, but it is true. Use it as a guide, but you know, it's okay to break rules if you really feel like you need to, or you want to try something different. I've done it many, many times. And sometimes it's a success, sometimes it isn't. But it's one of those things where sometimes you need to do it yourself. It would be like somebody telling you how to drive. Okay, well, you get on a highway and there's cars and, you know, you turn your wheel just a little bit here, but if you accelerate into a turn, etc., etc., they can tell you how to drive all day long. It's not until you're behind the wheel and you can react in real time that you really understand that. So try it out. Know the rules, but know that you can break them if you need to. So here's a little something. Symmetry is good generally. Repetition can be bad. If you have too many shapes that are essentially the same size or similar sizes, too many strokes that look the same, your brain will kind of reject that on the surface. It'll look odd. It'll look fake, you know. So this is a good example. I have 3 strips here that are pretty similar, and I didn't realize it until I started inking. So I'm adding these vertical, essentially these are ties. This is how the book bug ties these pages to his body. So I'm adding a few of those and I'm going to vary them, but just keep an eye out for that. So here's some more books that are going backwards in space. So you really want a light touch. It's one of the best things about these Winsor Newton brushes, these Kolinsky sables. When they're good, they're really good, and you can get such a fine point on them that you know, just to get something similar. Not that you can really get something similar. You would need a really thin nib or something. But with a brush, you can have really thick line, some really thin lines, and then just kind of let them fade off. I have been debating on whether or not the comic books are available entirely on my website, or I will do a Kickstarter. If anybody has any thoughts on that, let me know. Sometimes I think just having it on my site would be easier, especially for the Horace H. Hoover Mini Series. I think in the future I'll definitely do campaigns, but just the way things happen with Horace H. Hoover, I just want to get the books out and in people's hands as soon as possible. So that's why I was thinking my website, and then in the future I would have campaigns, and those campaigns would have alternate covers, they would have all sorts of stuff. So anybody has any thoughts, let me know. I was even thinking about having a convention only version of the comic book. It wouldn't be too drastically different, but it would just be the books that I sell at a convention, and that's it. And then online, I would have another book, maybe a slightly different. I don't want 10 different, slightly different versions of the book, but different covers are always nice. I have extra couple of pages. I have letters page in each of the books now. There are definitely times where I think I wish the book bug just wore a big unitard. Logan, maybe a standalone story for just convention buyers you can't get elsewhere. Yeah, that's true. I could do it'd be fun to do like a 12-page short story or something. Yeah, that could be pretty cool. I definitely have a lot of short stories for Horace H. Hoover that I would like to do that might not fit great in like an ongoing series or a collected. The character definitely lends itself well to short stories. So this is a good example of, so this book right here, and then this book behind it, you know, there's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet in difference between these books, because he's standing here. If you take a ruler and you went straight up and then went back, you would see that that's, you know, 4 or 5 feet or whatever behind him. The way to differentiate that, now we don't want to use atmospheric perspective in the way that I did here, where I broke up lines. What I want to do is actually pull this forward, and you pull it forward with detail. So, you know, just think of your vision. You're actually going to see really fine detail on this book here that you're not going to see on a book, you know, 5 feet further. It's like when you go to the eye doctor, you know, obviously the further you go back, the fuzzier it is, the less you see. So if I really pull up the detail here, it's going to give the impression that this is closer. So this is where a little bit of extra noodling makes the difference. And again, I can definitely pull it forward with color, but if you can do it in the black and white, it just makes the coloring look better. And plus, I'm the colorist, so it's not like I'm doing less work ultimately. I'm doing all of the work. So why would I just punish future Fabrizio? Hey Captain Goodnight, how's it going? Maybe the convention version can have an extra blank page for commissions. That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Thanks, Captain Goodnight. Huge shout out to Captain Goodnight, who helped proof issues 1, 2, and 3 before I sent them. Really incredible catches across the board. It's one of those deals where I do have a proofer, but since I'm the writer and letterer and everything, sometimes I make changes afterwards that I don't resubmit to the proofer because she just doesn't have time. So the fact that Captain Goodnight could go through these books again, catch some really, really great stuff, saved my bacon. Thanks again, Captain Goodnight. So hopefully this looks very different now, right? Lots of detail on this, no detail on that, and that'll just pop that forward. Because again, we want all of the interest to be on the book bug. You want to see where he's standing, you want to see what's going on, what he's interacting with, but that's not the focus. I have been watching bookbinding videos on YouTube for quite some time, and it is absolutely a hobby, a skill that I really need to get into. I'm just utterly fascinated by it. And it looks doable too. You know, you don't need a ton of machines. Looks like something you can do at home with a few tools here and there. See, if you look at how fine a line I can get with this, it's pretty. Let me zoom in here. It's pretty amazing. These Winsor Newton brushes are just top notch. Come on, here we go. So I can do the edge of this book. In shadow. Now, to be completely honest, is this going to show up? It might. You know, with digital printing as opposed to offset printing on like a nice white paper, thick paper with virtually no bleed on it. And I mean inking bleed, I don't mean page bleed. Yeah, you might actually see that fine a detail. Sometimes you can just kind of skip that because It's never going to be seen. I don't know if technically the Bookbug's house is up to code, but still standing after quite some time, so whatever he did seems to be working. I did watch the first episode of Fallout. I had heard, well, I guess mixed reviews on it. I thought it was fun. I didn't really have any problems with it. I am not an expert at the game or anything like that, but I feel like they got pretty fun atmosphere and it's a cool setting. So far, so good. And I'm off the camera. If anybody missed it, I was on a stream with John's Longbox, John Bua, Yang Jing Zhao, and Brian Bao, and Logan Effling. It was fun. I was on for like 3 hours. I think they still went past like 12:30. Talked about comics and music and all sorts of stuff. John has a current campaign going for Heroic Tales, so check that out. There is an appearance of Horace H. Hoover, but he's not actually in the comic. That's all I'll say about that. You will see Horace H. Hoover in the pages of the comic. How about that? And this Thursday, I will be on Yang Zhengzhao's YouTube channel. I will post that on Twitter for sure. That should be fun. I really like him, and we had a lot of fun last time. This will probably be my first interview since I left Alterna, so it should be interesting. We're talking about the future of Horace H. Hoover and printing and after Horace H. Hoover, what kind of other stories, comics, etc. that I want to do. Okay, this is kind of hard to get to. Actually, I'm going to have some coffee. Usually I ink straight for an hour. You know what? 40 minutes of inking. I'm going to have a coffee break. Well, it looks like 40 minutes is exactly the amount of time for coffee to get just slightly lukewarm. Delicious. Yeah, if anybody has any other characters they want to see me do, like I said, I was working on the Creeper because I've always wanted to do that. But yeah, it'd be fun to do something else. I have a couple in mind. I'll mix that up with the Horace H. Hoover stuff just to give myself a little bit of a break of books and vacuum cleaners. Even if it's a character that, you know, isn't Marvel or DC, you know, some other character might be fun to do too. I just really don't do fan art, so I wasn't in that mode. But how can you go wrong with the Creeper? Something that kills me about the Creeper, if you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend Googling the character, the Ditko drawing of him. How they draw him later on, I'm not a fan of at all. He's almost like the Joker, which defeats the purpose, I think. I don't know why they would do that. He's basically just a green and red Joker. At least visually, that's what he looks like. It's such a cool character design. Costume design, one of my favorites. Really cool. And I try to look at those as essentially teaching. Sorry, I think we're good. Teaching assets, you know, I use it as study guides on what makes a cool character. You know, is it the colors? Is it the design? Is it, you know, the way the line is on the character? You know, that sounds small, but that can have a lot of effect. I've also been considering selling some artwork. Sketch cards again. I used to love doing sketch cards. I haven't done some in quite some time. So it might be fun to get some sketch cards going again and selling them or auctioning them off or something. I just ordered some blank sketch cards. That way I could do other characters. I have my branded Horace H. Hoover sketch cards, but I figured I'll get some blank ones. That way I could do Heroic Tales or Wolf and Batsy or something else. I don't know if people are saddened or impressed by how long it takes to do a page. And admittedly, this is a very detailed page, so every other page is not going to be like this at all. This is extraordinary. But it should be extraordinary because it's the first page. You know, the splash page is really something that should really grab your attention. Not so much, you know, when you're looking at a newsstand, you're looking at the cover, right? And you might pick it up, flip through it, and then you take it home, and that's it. You know, now it's not going to really work that way for the most part, especially if you're purchasing stuff online. You can just look at the cover. But that doesn't mean you should skimp on this stuff, because when somebody does get it, splash page is such a huge part of the experience. Miss Saren, hey, how's it going? Good afternoon. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. Horror Mike actually published a collection of splash pages from like early pre-code comic book stuff. Really cool. I think they're sold out. I have a copy. I'm glad I grabbed it because I kind of find myself flipping through it a lot. it's a very cool like document to have, because I don't have those old comics, and even if I did, you don't necessarily want to pull out those comics every time, so having this collection of splash pages is really helpful. Do you have to fight yourself to not overly render a panel or even a splash page? For sure. It's very easy to over render stuff. This is borderline for me, to be honest, but like I said, for this particular page, it's unique. It's unique because if I just did rectangles for these books, it would not look right. It wouldn't. So I have to render to a certain degree. And, once you have that many items in a panel that you have to render to a certain degree, or if not, it'll look like you skimped on it, not that you're making a conscious effort to leave less detail. So yeah, I have definitely over-rendered. Sometimes, I don't know, it's not the worst idea in the world. Like making those like judgments is good, because the next time you're in the middle of it, like, am I over-rendering? You have a very clear idea in your head. Yes, I am over-rendering because this one drawing I did, and I kept doing it. Everything became gray or black. But that's the telltale sign. Is it readable? So if we look at this, if I can focus it. Better shot. So if we look at this shot, it's still very readable, so that's not over rendered. And there are definitely things you can do if you find yourself in that scenario. Now, it depends what the problem is. If you've gone too gray, where everything is gray, then that's fixable to some degree. If everything's too black, that's a lot harder to do. But say, for example, this whole wall here, I just rendered gray. And then the book bug is gray. And then if everything is gray, the way you would fix that is I would take black, basically, and just really, instead of these shadows, I would do this all black. And I might actually go back and redo these and punch those to solid black. I will do that a lot of times. Because as the page gets closer to being done, you might change your mind on what needs to pop and what doesn't. So if you go too gray, that's definitely fixable. If you go too black, then, covering your page in whiteout that's a lot harder to do. That's tough. You can do it, but it's not an easy fix, we'll say. Yeah, I often will just start with gray and then push the blacks. So I'm actually going to start on this panel on the bottom here. So since I've set up the detail and the structure of this house, I don't need to detail this as much. I'll have some books. You'll see them stacked like this, simple rectangles with a little bit of detail on occasion. That's it. Because you already know, your brain already knows what's going on. That essentially this is a house, it's made of books. This guy has books on him. So you really don't need to go and render every single one of these books again. If it does anything, it'll essentially blur your vision. You won't know what to focus on. So yeah, for something like this, I would definitely like punch the blacks, keep a lot of whites, probably very little gray. Just some texture here and there, but nothing major. Yeah, so this panel up here is gonna take 4 hours, but you know, one of these panels down here might take an hour, maybe 2 tops. But and just start with simplified shapes. And as you can see, like the blue line, the pencils aren't really tight. I know where things are and I know what direction they go and I know the light source, but I'm constantly shifting things on the fly. Yeah, this is definitely where you can be a little looser with your lines, a little more energetic. Don't be so stiff. You don't need to be. A panel like this, a reader will look at for, I think, a second, something like that, depending on how much dialogue is in it, but they'll read the dialogue and they'll just move right past it. That first splash page, they might open up the book, look at that splash page, read it, and then kind of look at the art for a bit. But one of these small panels, I'm not saying they're worthless because they need to convey just as much information, but it's just not as important for the reader. Yeah, and in some ways, these small panels are much harder than the large panels to draw. Oh, it's 3:52. So I usually just do this for an hour. Probably stop in a few minutes. I did want to show a comic book that I think I mentioned once or twice before, and I at least wanted to show it just because I don't think a lot of people know of it. And it's really one of my favorites. I don't know if it's an influence for Horace H. Hoover, really, but just a very cool comic. It was 10 minutes late, huh? So this is a little bit of that detail, which is essentially the pages. Alrighty, I think I'm good for the day. Take a look at the image, show that comic book real quick, and then call it a day. We'll also have a little more coffee. If you ever want to know if your house is straight or not, buy a brush and set it on a table. It is the most frustrating thing in the world. I think that's okay. Yep, so made some more progress. This is almost done. Really, I just have to finish up the top here. I do have to do symbols and some language on these main focus books. And just a tiny little bit of work there. These two panels won't take too long to do. But probably another hour or two per panel. But the book I wanted to show, so I grabbed some coffee. Is Brendan. It's an Italian comic book. And the first time I got this, I don't know how old I was, so I don't know when this actually came out. It seems like they've been publishing for a long time. But it's really one of my favorites, and it was a huge influence on me. It's in Italian. I actually don't think they have an English version of this. But to be honest, I recommend it for everyone. It's that was a little not safe for work there, but it is almost a combination of visually The Crow. So the main character kind of looks like The Crow. It's a post-apocalyptic sort of Western sci-fi kind of thing. Really some amazing character designs and environments. Really interesting, cool stuff. The stories are great, but if you don't speak Italian, you won't be able to really get that part of it. But anyway, highly recommend these. I have a bunch of them. One of my favorites. Alpha Channel, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it, Alpha Channel. Psychotronic Squirt Gun, greetings, talent. Hey, how's it going? I'm actually just wrapping up today, but thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. Yeah, I did start a few minutes late, but sometimes whenever you find a good place to stop for the piece of artwork, you really should stop and just let it go. Logan, love the black and white art over color. Yeah, if you do the black and... Man, it's such an art form just to do the black and white. Yeah, and you know what? If that Brendan looks cool, if you haven't read Dylan Dog, I do know that they have an English version of Dylan Dog. It's a very different style, but it's still really cool. It's like... How do I describe it? Constantine meets... I don't know. It's occult detective, supernatural stuff. Really, really amazing artwork, though. So I would check out Dylan Dog. I think Mignola actually did a cover for the collected of that. So yeah, there's some really cool Italian stuff that unfortunately they don't have the English translation for, which is a bit of a bummer. But I don't know. Sometimes we've all seen a lot of the same artwork, the same artists, the same comics. You know, just grabbing something completely different just kind of makes you look at things a little differently. So I like to pull that out once in a while and page through it, read it a little bit. Again, the stories are very cool. It's the reason I was thinking of it recently is because I watched the first episode of Fallout, post-apocalyptic kind of thing, but Brendan is a different take on that post-apocalyptic feel, and a very cool one though. So all right. Yeah, Dylan Dog. Seriously, anybody doesn't know it, I highly recommend it. All right. I think that's good for the day. I appreciate it, everybody. Yeah, for any recent news about Horace H. Hoover, my website should be updated. I'll be keeping that posted. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack, that's where I'll be really pushing the latest and the greatest. I believe that I have that in the description. If not, check back and I'll post that. So sign up for that, because as soon as the issues are ready to sell, I'll be pushing that through the Substack newsletter email blast. All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Thanks a lot. Bye.